So, by way of introduction, my name is Hari Ganesh Kumar. I'm the practice lead here at Work Perfect. I work very closely with the delivery team, helping ensure our customers get the most out of our Monday.com platform. And I'm really excited to have with us today Joe McKay. Joe, in a previous life, was part of Destination New South Wales, where he was brings a range of experience in both strategy, business operations from both private and public sector organizations. As part of his role at Destination New South Wales, he was an associate director of strategic projects. And Destination New South
I
Wales
can't
was a
hear this
global
person.
organization wanting to grow tourism and travel across New South Wales. Joe's focus for the last period while he was at Destination New South Wales was to roll out an OKR framework and drive the organization's 10-year strategy as the industry was grappling with the effects of COVID. Joe's fascinated by the power of technology and data to improve performance. So, Joe, what was your choice from that quiz in terms of wanting to retire at 50, sounding smarter at the barbecue?
Look,
Um,
I'd go option D, all of the above. Why
yes,
not?
I think that's always one of the advantages of being the presenter. It's like you get to throw in additional options that weren't as part of the original discussion.
Yeah, that's it. But I think what is
So, Joe,
interesting about it is to see how many people are kind of open to some professional development and improving themselves to hopefully go and get that promotion this year. So let's see.
fantastic. So, how about we get straight into it? Joe, do you want to give us an overview of what we're going to cover off today and in our session coming up next week?
Yeah, so really the focus of the session today is to cover off a lot of the core theory around strategy. Strategy particularly is a really overused and potentially misunderstood term. So looking at our kind of view on strategy, and then looking at the details, really the 101 or what the F is OKR. So the very basics around objectives and key results as a framework, which is going to help execute on strategy. And we'll work through some interactive exercise and we'll collaborate together to start to build out a very basic strategy. Next week's session is then more about operationalizing that, or how everyone on the call can start to use the theory that we go through today in their own context and apply some of those lessons to your own organization.
Fantastic. Thanks, Joe. So I think what would be really good to sort of start off with, I touched a little bit about you being with Destination New South Wales, effectively leading their strategy pretty much at the peak of COVID. How about you give a bit of a background of what that project was and what your role was?
Yeah, so I was at Destination New South Wales, started in 2019, and then obviously we know what happened early in 2020. The impact of COVID on tourism and travel, as you can imagine, was enormous. Essentially overnight, the whole industry shut down, and so the stakes were pretty high. There's around 300,000 people that are employed in the travel industry in New South Wales alone. And those people were looking to Destination New South Wales to navigate a way through the other side of this thing called COVID. We had no idea really what it meant longer term. So we knew we had to get the strategy right and figure out a way to come back bigger and better. I think we did acknowledge that at a point in time it would become an opportunity. We knew COVID wouldn't last forever. And so ultimately there was going to be that moment of kind of everyone getting back into market and having that real itch and that desire to travel. So we knew that there would be an opportunity at a point in time. And so that's where the kind of planning and the strategic process was really important to get that right and make the most of that opportunity when it arrived. So what we went through there was a process to develop a 10-year strategy. So our modeling suggested that it was going to take about 10 years to essentially replace the value that had been wiped off the economy, the tourism and travel economy through COVID. And so we kicked off a really, really comprehensive process, brought in a consultant, we had a steering committee, we set up working groups, we had sprints, we had workshops, we had the whole lot. And finally got to a point where we developed a 10-year strategy that we were really happy with. we were ready to launch it, I guess, to take it to our stakeholders. So we took all our people through the strategy. Everyone got a copy, a beautiful glossy printed brochure with the strategy. We launched it to media. We had the minister talking about it. We had a bunch of all hands meetings to work through the strategy, and ultimately got to a point where we were ready to launch.
Fantastic, and I always love asking this question, and it is a pointed question. It's like so, and curious to see what the audience actually thinks. It's like, so what happened after we launched that strategy? So we're going to try a bit of reactions using the team functions as well. So there's three options here. What do we think? What do you think happened? So if you think that the strategy was a smashing success, at the top of your team screen, click on the reactions and hit applause. If you think the strategy worked, but it was a bit more of a slow burn, hit the heart icon. If you think something else completely happened, you can hit the reactions and then hit surprise. So again, go ahead and do that now on your screens. And let's see what people were expected after we actually launched the strategy. So we've got a couple of surprised, something else happening.
I'm hoping to see a few applause in there somewhere along the way.
Yeah, I'm an optimist, so I think the strategy was a smashing success.
Good one, Harry. Thank you.
Yeah, we've got a couple of more applauses and some hearts and some surprises coming through. So a good mix of different reactions that kind of came through. So what actually happened, Joe, like once you actually hit launch?
Yeah, so look, a little bit disappointingly and to our surprise, we actually didn't see a whole lot of impact from the strategy straight away. So we, in a nutshell, none of our kind of leading indicators moved in the right direction. And actually what we saw was that staff engagement started to drop a little bit. So overall, that initial sort of strategic planning process, we wouldn't consider a success, I don't think.
Yeah. And then where to from there? Like, so when it wasn't a success, and you spent all this time and these consultants kind of come in through, what was the next step from there?
So a couple of things kind of dawned on me and I guess the leadership team around Destination New South Wales. I think we were looking at strategy the wrong way. Strategy isn't really a document or a plan or a PowerPoint that you launch and you throw out there and start to achieve things. It really is an ongoing conversation. It's a process. It needs to live and breathe. So starting with a plan is really important, but then actually committing to that process of change and evolving that, I guess that game plan is really important. So, potentially the strategy was a little bit too complex. I mentioned it was a 10-year strategy, and that's quite hard to break down and kind of start putting into practice for individuals in their roles. And ultimately related to that, we didn't have a clear platform or a place where the strategy could live and breathe. I mentioned we had a few documents, we had a few meetings and things like that, but we didn't have that source of truth where everyone could collaborate on the strategy and understand how they fit into the bigger picture on a daily basis.
Okay, so some key learnings there in terms of, probably really complex. How do we actually chunk it down? So what was the next step from there? Like, how did you then decide to roll it out or do more things?
So we discovered OKR, objectives and key results, as a framework to use, as a framework to start to break down that really big, long-term 10-year game plan, break that into manageable pieces. So we rolled out OKR across the organisation, and Monday.com was the platform where our strategy came to life and started to live and breathe. So it was really a simplification process. And the OKR framework was a really important part of that.
And did that work? Like once you actually went more to a more simpler process, what were some of the things that happened post launching that?
Yeah, so at that point in time, I mean, COVID was still a factor. We didn't somehow beat COVID just through using OKRs. But the main thing we were looking at the time was really staff engagement with strategy. So are people understanding their role in the strategy and where they fit in when we have the opportunity to to go back to market and kind of in a post-COVID environment. And that really started to tick up. We saw some strong green shoots coming through via staff engagement in that way, and the organisation was really well placed to make the most coming out of COVID. And, you know, for example, Vivid now has just finished and it's been its biggest ever year. So a few really good things have happened as a result of moving to that process.
Fantastic. Thanks so much. It's really good to hear that context, right? Like, and we hear, you know, big things about OKRs and vision statements, really large organizations. It's great for you to talk through that experience of, you know, what you started with and how that kind of went through. I guess for the audience on the call and myself, where's a good place for us to actually start, or teams to effectively start with, when we are talking about, you know, strategy and how we actually drive that within an organization?
Yeah, so look, in my opinion, and this is something that we were really clear on at Destination New South Wales, was you need to start with a vision. All the great organisations will have a really clear vision for where they want to get to, or what the world looks like in the future as a result of the organisation being in existence. So you need that really, really clear North Star that ultimately guides any decision that's made at any level of the organisation. Before you get into any of the nuts and bolts about strategy or objectives or key results, it's about having that clear vision, the North Star that's going to ultimately align everybody to a common goal.
And what would you say is like some of the things from a vision? Like, you know, we hear a lot about different vision statements as well. Perhaps we actually talk about, and again, try a bit more of this interaction, and talk about, you know, what's a good vision statement, or what's a statement that really compels our team. So perhaps if we'll hop into Slido now.
Yeah, we've got a little quiz set up. I think the key thing to look, and I'm interested to see what the audience knows around some of the kind of most successful organisations in the world and how they look at vision. So we've got a little Slido quiz. I'll share my screen, and if you grab your phones, if you haven't already scanned the QR code, you should be able to soon. So you can join with the QR or slido.com, #WorkPerfect. So what we're going to do here is we're going to throw out 3 visions for 3 different companies and see if you can align the vision to the company. I'll open up the voting. So the first vision is to make people happy. When we look at this as a vision, the scale of it is really important. You know, this is about all people. This is a really big, lofty, global ambition. And making people happy is a really inspirational thing to go out and for someone to try and do every day. So it's a really, really compelling, positive, large scale vision. Which organisation do you think this belongs to?
We've got about 20 odd participants. Yeah. So
it looks like, so most votes are in, and look, most people are on the money here. This is definitely Disney. McDonald's might make you happy at the time. Instagram might as well. But yeah, so that's a vision for Disney. And again, you know, you look at the scale of this, and if you work at Disney, you see that on the wall or on the door at Disney. You know, that's what you're ultimately trying to achieve every day. That's a really inspirational and compelling vision. So that one was for Disney. Let's move to the next one. So to unlock the potential of human creativity. Again, this is huge scale. We're talking about all of humankind here. And it gets you thinking, you know, what is the potential of human creativity? What could that look like?
I think you need to open the poll as well.
I don't know. That usually helps people vote. Give it a few seconds before people see where the majority is going. Interesting. So this one actually belongs to Spotify. So again, looking at the scale, it takes you to another place. It helps you imagine a world in the future where things are better and we have unlocked that potential, and what does that look like? So this is the vision for Spotify. All right, last one. A few votes coming in for Spotify now. I've revealed the answer. That's good to see. Provide access to the world's information in one click. I'm expecting a pretty clear majority for this one.
I've got to say, I might be showing my age by recognizing the other providers.
Yeah, Ask Jeeves for a while. It was a genuine choice, wasn't it, for a while between these three? It's not anymore. So yeah, this is Google. Again, you look at this as a concept, all the information in the world and having access to that in a single click, and they've essentially achieved that. So when you start with a vision that's compelling, that is big scale, it's got to feel huge. That's really the starting point before we look at anything around nuts and bolts and detail on strategy. So a few really good examples there. I'm just going to pause the poll.
Fantastic. So it's really good to see is we hear about these vision statements quite a lot, right? And it's good to see that link between what the vision statement is and how that then comes through to strategy. So I guess then the natural progression or the natural question for you then is like, what exactly is strategy, or how do we end up defining strategy?
Yeah, so look, I see strategy, and there's a million and different ways to look at strategy and a bunch of different frameworks out there. Fundamentally, I see strategy as a plan to create and capture value. And I always like to think of things in kind of practical examples. So for me, when I look at trying to kind of explain this to people, I think about a really simple organization, something like a bakery. For those who might not know, I'm based in France at the moment. I'm obsessed with the croissant and the baguettes and all the great things that you can get from a bakery. So my kind of daydream is to go and start a bakery one day. But if you look at a bakery as a business, ultimately what you do is you take a set of ingredients, you take a recipe, which is kind of IP, you take some human resources, some machinery, and put that all together, and you create something that has a value that's greater than those individual parts altogether, and ultimately capture that value as a bakery, as an organization, by selling all those products. So kind of no matter the context or the industry or what your business actually does, fundamentally your strategy is your plan to create some value for a set of customers, and then capture that value by selling a service or a product. So at its most simplistic, that's how I look at strategy and think about it.
Okay. And once we actually have that, that's like a good start to effectively capture value. But then how do we take that one step further? Is there some more context that you'd actually add to that in terms of what are the lenses we should be looking at or considering?
Yeah, so there's a few key ingredients, just running with the bakery theme. There's a few ingredients that we need to consider. And again, there's a million and one ways to look at this. The reading that I've done and kind of the examples I've seen ultimately all boil down to a version of something along these lines. Four key ingredients. First of all, we know that the customer comes first, and customer centricity is so important. Ultimately, what we're trying to do is answer the question of what do we want our customers to think of us? What's that value that we're going to create for them? So you might also think of this as your customer value proposition. Ultimately, what are we going to be able to produce that has value to a customer? Then it's around excellence, which is, as an organization, what are the skills or the resources that we need to be great at something to create that value for customers? So what do we need to excel at internally to be able to deliver this value to customers? Innovation is then all about kind of staying in the game or being able to continue to improve and create value into the future. So we might be able to create value today for a customer, but how do we position ourselves to make sure that we're able to keep producing that value and creating value into the future? And the financial lens there at the end, that's really the second part of the strategy piece, that's around capturing that value for ourselves. So we might have an excellent product, we might be very innovative, but if we don't have a method to capture that value we're creating for ourselves, we're not going to stay in business for very long. So I look at these 4 objectives in conjunction. They all need to be there. They all need to be part of the strategy. And kind of, as I said a little bit earlier, the strategy, the recipe might change over time. It's important to continually check in and make sure that we're dialing up and down these different elements or ingredients as the world changes around us.
Excellent. So we talked a little bit about strategy and vision, right? So you've effectively got your vision, you've then got your strategy. So again, the question that popped into my mind when we were actually talking through this, then how does this then relate to an OKR, right? Like, how does that actually kind of come into play? So can you give us a bit more context or example?
Yeah. So look, OKR is really a simple framework that helps you to then execute on the strategy. So you develop the plan, you figure out how you're creating value and how you're going to capture that value. And OKR then becomes a nice simple framework that helps you actually turn that into action. It's essentially a method of setting and measuring your goals, and it's going to help you to put that strategy into practice.
And can you take us through like a simple example maybe that'll actually help us put this into context?
Yeah, so coming back to that kind of mountain climber analogy, I think on the next slide, there we go. We've set our vision, we've got our North Star of ultimately why we exist and what we want to be famous for. The objective is then the mountain that we want to climb. So it's the big, hairy, audacious goal, however you think of it. It's all about, again, just inspiring people into action. And then your key results are where we ground that in reality. And they're the measurable signs that we're actually on the right track to achieve that objective. And that's where you really come to the crunch with OKRs. So the key results need to be really actionable, really focused. They're black and white, and we'll look in detail at some of the characteristics of a good key result later. But ultimately, that's how objectives and key results kind of sit together to help you achieve those really big, hairy, audacious goals.
And is there a set way that you'd effectively look at structuring your OKRs as well?
Yeah, so the beauty of OKRs in my head is the simplicity of kind of the format of them. Even if you're Google trying to provide access to the world's information in one click, all your key results, objectives, and key results follow the same format, and it's as simple as I'll achieve an objective as measured by a key result. So continuing on with the bakery, the objective might be to make the best croissant in France. And the way we might measure that is through our Google reviews rating, as an example. So we're combining a lofty objective, a big picture objective, with some really detailed, specific, measurable key results. And those come together to help kind of break down any mountain climb.
No, makes perfect sense from that aspect. I think what might help is perhaps if we actually run through an example of how we would use this in reality or in practice.
Yeah, great idea. So look, I've kind of built out the scenario around Joe's Bakery. I've hopefully gotten you over here in France with me. You're thinking about working in a bakery because it's time to start. You've all been appointed to the leadership team at the bakery here. And so what we want to do now is to try and develop a strategy for how we're going to deliver on our vision. So the vision for Joe's Bakery is to bring croissant to the world, something we're all very passionate about here at Joe's Bakery. And I'm going to get all of your help to start to develop this strategy. And we're going to look at those four lenses, or the 4 ingredients that we talked about, and start to actually put a strategy together. So there's a few ground rules to cover off on the next slide there. I'm going to share my screen, and I'll be in monday.com just capturing people's thoughts. Use the meeting chat to throw out your objectives, your suggested objectives that we should have at Joe's Bakery. There's no such thing as a bad idea. You'll find that quantity over quality will help you actually get to the best thinking that's inside you. And be kind to yourself. Throw it out there. There's no wrong answers. if it's not flowing, if you're not feeling it, then feel free to kind of sit on the sideline and see what comes out. That's completely fine. But just go easy on yourself, because it's a challenging process to go through. I'm going to share my screen so you can start to see our strategy coming together. But just use the meeting chat. The first objective we're going to look at is around that lens of customer. So I mentioned we start with our vision, and we want to bring croissant to the world. That's our vision. That's what we're trying to achieve. So if we now look at our customer objective, how do we want our customers to think of us? What's the value that we're going to create for them at Joe's Bakery? And I've had a go at one example, but I'd love to hear your thoughts in the meeting chat. Throw anything out, no bad ideas. Let me know what you're thinking.
Like effectively, what you think an objective may be that would be great for Joe's Bakery, whether that's something you're not sure if it is an objective or if it isn't, or if it's a goal or something. Just any idea that you have as to how we can be, how do we want our customers to perceive Joe's Bakery?
Looks like you've got a helper there, Harry. You might have a few good ideas.
Yes, he heard the word croissants and he came in and he said like, "Yep, croissants, I'm in." So I think a good objective is like, how do we target kids to get more interested in baking?
Yeah. So when we're looking at objectives, as I kind of mentioned a bit earlier, there's no detail at this point. It's really about scale. This needs to inspire action. It needs to be an audacious goal. I can hear my helper crying in the bedroom next door as well. Sorry.
Yeah, we've got a good example. We've got a gluten-free croissant.
Great, like it.
And they're coming in thick and fast now. Value for money. Have 30 online orders per day. And we've got a couple more. Have a variety of products rather than just croissants.
Mm-hmm.
Have carbon-free croissants.
I love that. So that could be something around, our being the green bakery or something along those lines.
Having the croissants delivered to you.
That's a great one.
Prove to the world that French bakeries make the best bread.
That's a great one. Love it.
Okay, well, we've got one or two more. Reward customers who bring a friend. And I think create a brand image target audience that relates to or is easily remembered.
And a brand image. I think Joe's Bakery is pretty memorable for me, at least. So these are great, and thank you for all your contributions there. That's really good to see. I think what I would say with some of these is where so some of these around where we're starting to get some metrics and some granular detail. These would tend to look more a little bit like key results, which is kind of part 2 of our goal, or our objective, I should say. So the objective at this point is that really big, compelling vision. So something like being the green bakery, the world's green bakery, or prove to the world that French bakeries make the best bread. That's the kind of level of thinking we're looking at when we're setting our objectives. Ultimately, these need to bring a whole organization together on the journey. And through the key results, we'll start to get into some of those more detailed initiatives and projects and ways we might look at achieving some of these objectives. But there were some really good ideas there, so thank you for that. How are we going for time, Harry? Have we got time to do another objective, or should we keep moving on?
I think we should probably move into the key results section and effectively looking at those. I think there's some really good ideas that we have there from the objectives.
Absolutely.
I think it would be a good way to distinguish, as you called out, some of those items are actually key results versus an objective. So perhaps we can spend a bit of time looking at what the key results are.
Yeah, sounds good.
So let me just go back to sharing my screen.
We've lost your helper, Harry. We've lost mine too.
He's just off screen. All right.
So the way the strategy process would normally kind of unfold from there would be you'd look at your other three objectives, set an objective that you're happy with for each of those, and then we would move into key results that sit underneath each of those objectives. So when we're looking at key results, there's kind of 4 key characteristics that we want to talk through today. 3 of them are quite simple. They're the 3 on screen, and they're just simple yes/no tests that you need to follow. The 4th one's a little bit more complex, but definitely the most important. So we'll spend a bit more time on that. So looking at these 3 characteristics of key results, there's really 3 simple questions you need to ask yourself. First of all, does it have a number? If it doesn't have a number, it's not measurable. It's not a key result. So first and foremost, does it have a number? Is it measurable? Second of all, a key result needs to be time bound. So ask yourself, does it have a date or a time for completion? If it doesn't, again, it's not going to make a great key result. And then key results also need to be stretch targets. Remember, we're trying to climb Everest here. So it needs to push you up the hill. It needs to feel like an uphill target. And so the third question you'd ask yourself is it easy? And if it's easy, or if it's something that you're already doing and you just want to tick the box, then it's again not going to make a great key result. And there's kind of one final characteristic that we want to cover off, which is a little bit more complex, and we're going to spend more time looking at it, but it's certainly the most important part of setting a good key result. On the next slide, we'll see the kind of 4th question to ask yourself when we're going through this process. When we set key results, we ultimately want to be focusing on outcomes, not outputs. So the outcome is the why. It's ultimately what you're trying to achieve by doing anything. Whereas outputs are activities or projects. They might be initiatives. So they're things that you might do that will help you achieve an outcome, or they might help you achieve an outcome, but they may not. So to look at this in, again, put a bit more of a context on this, we can look at the bakery example again. If we think about our time in the bakery, we know that more satisfied customers will come to the bakery more often. They'll spend more when they're here, and they'll tell their friends about the bakery. And so ultimately, we know that more satisfied customers will ultimately give us greater yield. So we're setting a goal to improve customer satisfaction. We want to grow that as a business. And if we were trying to achieve that, a few things that we might look at doing on the next slide are some outputs. There's some projects or some initiatives that we might look at with a view to trying to grow our customer service. We might open more stores, we might move into coffee, and a few of the ideas that came through for our objective were there as well. You know, moving into croissant delivery, things like that. They're projects or initiatives. Cutting costs as well, or reducing price is an initiative. The problem with focusing on outputs is we're never 100% sure if they're actually going to achieve the outcome. So we might open 20 more stores and customer satisfaction might not move. We might cut our costs and give a 20% discount to customers, and it may not improve customer satisfaction. So if we were to focus on these outputs as our key results, we'd potentially we'd definitely be measuring the wrong thing, and we'd potentially be delivering on initiatives that aren't actually achieving the underlying outcome we want to deliver, which is to grow our customer satisfaction. So we want to park the outputs. All we want to do is focus on the outcome of growing our customer satisfaction. And from there, if that's our key result, to grow customer satisfaction by X percentage, maybe we're using an NPS score. If we focus on just the outcome, what we then do is we unlock the capability of our people and our teams to actually determine what's the most effective set of initiatives or projects or things we need to do to go out and move that dial. So rather than specifying, let's open more stores or let's move into coffee, all we're trying to do is move customer satisfaction. And then our people, the capability of our people really comes to the fore to help us get there in the most effective way. So if we're looking at outputs and we want to try and unpack and get to the outcome that we really want to be measuring at the core of it all, the simple question to ask is, so what? So if we set a goal to open 10 more stores, okay, so what? What are we trying to achieve by doing that? Is it growing customer satisfaction? Is it making it easier for people to find us? We need to unpack the outcome that sits underneath the outputs. And we see it a lot in organizations where, and these are all really good ideas as projects, as initiatives, but we want to try and get down, when we're looking at objectives and key results, we want to try and get down to the outcome at the core of these projects, of what they're ultimately trying to achieve.
Thanks, Jared. That's really helpful. And I think the two things, having worked with OKRs for a while now, for at least 1 or 2 years, conceptually it is extremely simple, but then when you try to implement it or you try to roll it out, it becomes very complex or very hard really quickly. And one of the
Yeah,
best things that I like about the outputs versus outcomes is going back to that so what question. And I think that really helps you sharpen and focus. It's like, okay, is this going to drive the objective that I'm after? Are we actually going to get those outcomes that are coming along? I think this is
yeah,
like a really good point worth exploring a little bit further. And we thought one of the ways that we could do this is just have, again, a very simple quiz in terms of what's a good objective, what's not. So again, we're going to hop back into Slido to
yeah.
effectively
I'll
look
share my
at a
screen.
couple of different objectives as well, see what that actually looks like, get some feedback from the audience, and then potentially also, if the audience has some questions as well from an objectives or key results, feel free to put them into the chat window now as well, and we'll start looking at those shortly.
So we're back into Slido. Grab your phones. It'll be the same QR. You should still have Slido up on your phone, hopefully. And move into our quiz. So this is just going to test what you've hopefully learned today around OKRs, particularly the key results side of things. So there's 30 seconds on the clock there. Which of these is the best key result? So majority went for option B, which is correct. So if we look at option A is an output. Baking croissant is ultimately not what we're about at the bakery. It's a key part of our process, of our strategy. But the outcome we're trying to achieve is to sell that product. So let's measure that. If we bake those 1,000 croissants, but we can't sell them, we haven't moved the dial. So tracking the number of croissants we're baking rather than the number we're selling is not the most effective way to look at objectives and key results. So option B was correct there. Well done to the majority. All right, next question's up. Everyone's got their responses in. So good. Now we're getting a feel for how this works. So yep, it's absolutely option A there. If we look at option B, we might produce 100 blog posts. But again, if no one's reading them, if they're not growing our audience on social media, or they're not growing our brand awareness, there's no point in writing those blog posts. So if we focus on our social media audience and growing that as an outcome, Then it's over to the marketing and the comms team to figure out what's the best way to achieve that. Is it blog post? Is it a podcast? Is it video content? So by stepping back, asking so what, getting to the outcome, again, we're unlocking all the capability of our people and our experts in those positions to figure out the best way to get us to that destination. This one's a real test, Harry, of whether we've done our job today or not, I think.
Yes.
Need to see a good score for this one. Very good, 95%. Absolutely. So always outcomes. There's probably a very limited set of circumstances where you may need to, for different reasons, track an output. You might have a reporting burden or administration requirement that you have to comply with. And you may in that case look at outputs, but vast majority of the time we want to be asking so what, we want to be focusing on the outcome. Second last question here for you all.
I think we got the time zones wrong. Then it should have been what's for lunch.
What's for breakfast? It's 5:15 in the morning here in France, so I'm going straight to the bakery after this.
Yeah.
Yep, very good. So again, we need to be asking so what to try and get to the core of that outcome. It's an interesting exercise to go through. You might have your own targets or your own performance plan, kind of your key results. Have a look at them and try and figure out, are they outputs or are they outcomes? And if they're outputs, can you actually unpack and get to the outcome that sits underneath those outputs in your own context? Last question. This one's a little bit more tricky and something we can talk through. It always makes me nervous seeing the seconds tick down with people still yet to submit. One to go. It's okay. So we haven't talked specifically about this. Majority of people are on the money here. Starting kind of just running through the options from A to C. If you've got more than 5 measures that you're trying to track, remember we're talking about at least 4 objectives across those 4 ingredients. If you then have more than 5 measures for each, all of a sudden you've got 25 or more measures that you're trying to track, and it's just too much. The flip side of that, if you just have a single key result for your objective, it's very hard to figure out a single number or a single measure that's going to cover every aspect of what you're trying to achieve. Kind of the example I would usually look at is, say, a financial objective. If our objective was to, let's say, grow profit, if that was our objective, if we just had a key result on growing our revenue, we might achieve that number. We might grow our revenue, but if our cost of sales or our profit margin drops, we might not actually achieve the ultimate profit objective. So you generally need 3. Less is more, but you'll generally need 3 to make sure you've got a balanced approach to the objective that you're trying to achieve. So 3 to 5 is a good number. Less is more, but 1 or 2 generally won't be enough to make sure you're covering off all the aspects that you need to cover within the objective. Well done to Deanne and Damien, who got them all right. Oh, Harry, you were playing along. Which one did you get wrong? That's a bit of a worry.
Probably the one that was talking about dinner.
Very good. Well, look, that's the end of the quiz.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, everyone, for participating in the quiz as well. What we're really going to do now is just kind of talk a little bit about what we're going to cover off next week in sort of phase two. Uh, and what we've kind of covered off today specifically as well. We do have about 5 or 7 minutes left at the end of this session. So if you do have questions or if you do have comments or thoughts that you'd like to, feel free to pop it into the chat window. But Joe, perhaps if we would just want to go do a bit of a recap of the stuff that we've covered off today, what the team can expect post this call and what's happening next week.
Yeah, so look, we've covered off what is strategy in its simplest form, and it's a plan to create and capture value fundamentally, whatever your context. We've looked at the 101 of OKR, and it's really your objective, your big, hairy, audacious goal, and then your key results that are your measurable, concrete actions you're going to take measurable signs that you're on the right track. We've worked through setting an objective together. We've worked through kind of the characteristics of key results. Next week, what we want to do is take the framework, take the structure and the concepts, and then start to apply those in different organizations. We know that every organization is different. Not every organization is Joe's Bakery. And so your ways of working, your team culture, your environment, your external context is going to impact how you can actually implement and execute on strategy. So we'll look at a few different ways that you can nip and tuck the OKR framework to make sure your strategy sticks in your context. Then we look at routines around strategy. I mentioned at the beginning, it's an ongoing process. It's a conversation that needs to keep happening. It's not building a boat and launching it off the dock and watching it sail off into the sunset. It really takes routine and commitment. So we'll look at how we can build those effective routines in your organization and how we bring strategy to life through that process as well.
And I think the beauty of what we're going to be doing next week as well is looking at how technology enables us to do this better. So I think one of the biggest thing is while the concepts of OKR, the concepts of goal settings and KPIs, they've been around for ages. We've had lots of feedback loops. The difference that we have now with the technology that's available is you can have faster feedback loops. So you're not waiting for 6 months after you've set a strategy or an objective in place to then say, hey, how am I actually tracking towards this? You have much better ability to showcase, hey, how are we tracking for our key results and these objectives across your entire organization? And using tools like Monday.com makes it a lot easier for you to get that holistic view, whether you're at a team level, at an organizational level, or even down to an individual level of how I'm making an impact from that objective. So really excited to talk about that further next week as well. As I did mention, we have about 3 to 5 minutes left. If anybody has any questions, feel free to pop it into the chat window. We will also be sending out a short feedback form pretty much right now at the end of this session. There'll also be a couple of downloadable resources that we will be sharing with the group. Some to help cover off what we've talked about today, plus also just almost a little cheat worksheet that you can use to help yourself set up your strategies, what OKRs are, how do you actually look at setting compelling objectives across those 4 different lenses as well. So look out for those in your email inboxes shortly as well. You will see there is a feedback form in the chat window. So would love for those that may need to drop off early, happy for you to drop off and click on that feedback form and provide some feedback for us for the next session as well. If there are any questions, again, I can open it up to the floor. Feel free to put it in the chat window, or if you'd like to, you can come off mute and ask either Joe or myself any. It doesn't look like there's any immediate questions at the moment. So again, I'll take this opportunity to say thank you to everyone for a really engaging session. We really appreciate everyone participating both in the chat and producing some of their ideas as well. And engaging with us in trying to set objectives. So it's been really good for that. Again, a last call out, if you can provide your feedback on the feedback form, and we'll go from that. Joe, any closing comments from you?
Thanks everyone for your help at Joe's Bakery. Hopefully we achieve that vision of bringing croissant to the world.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Joe. Thank you everyone for your time, and we look forward to seeing you at our next one.